Welcome, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, whether you are here live with us in the Zoom or if you are watching afterwards on our podcast or YouTube. My name is Emma Goldblatt and I'm the program director here at tzedek, and we're really excited to bring you a class today with Rabba Melissa Scholten-Gutierrez. She is a values-driven Jewish educator, community builder, and visionary leader. Rabba Melissa currently serves the community as a consultant focused on bringing her vibrant energy and varied expertise to organizations nationwide. She's a recent graduate of M Squared, the Institute for Experiential Jewish Educators, Senior Educators Cohort, and an active volunteer leader. Rabba Melissa is known for her uniquely joyful Judaism and Torah-based social justice work. She received her rabbinic ordination from Maharat and a master's in social work from the University of Illinois. She also has learned intensely at Nishmat and Pardes in Jerusalem. In her free time, in quotes, Rabba Melissa enjoys writing. She has been published in several print and digital forums, reading novels, and spending time with her family in beautiful Denver, Colorado. So with that, Rabba Melissa, you can have the floor.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Rav Shmuley, and the whole Uri Tzedek team. It is really an honor to get to teach Torah with you all, to teach with friends, and to friends new and old. I think everyone who comes to learn with is just a friend in the make to be made. I'm really excited. I love social justice Torah, as Emma said. So this is just like a really, really fun and exciting opportunity for me to get to be together with you all, whether you are here in the moment watching on Facebook or watching the Zoom recording or podcast later. I am going to be interactive, so if it's possible for you to be around, that's great, including just responding to chat prompts. And if you're on Facebook, we'd love to have you join us over in the Zoom also, so you can respond, because I unfortunately will not see your responses if you are only on Facebook.
Sorry to interrupt. They can leave a Facebook comment. I will be monitoring.
You'll see it. Okay, great. Emma will see your comments on Facebook. Hooray! And she'll let me know. Great, because I will not see them. Before we get started, I just want to throw out there. So first of all, make sure that your name says whatever you want me to call you. Today, as we're calling out people, pronouns are lovely. So we are addressing people the way they want to be addressed. It's really important to me that we are, speaking to one another in appropriate and respectful ways. So just make sure that that is, you're there the way you want to be addressed to one another. Both to me or to others in the Zoom who may not know you. I know many of you that are here, but everyone else may not. So that's first. And then the first thing I really want to dive into before we actually start talking sources and Torah, which are very real in this topic, is when I say the word social justice, or when you read the flyer for today and you saw that we were going to talk about social justice and Judaism, or social justice and Torah, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? So you can either drop it in the chat, drop in Facebook comments, or if you want to say it out loud, you're welcome to, but just really quickly, super fast. Righteous. Obligation. Helping others. Right. Grounding. How we protect ourselves and help others. All right, so we've got some nice overlap, but with some nuances happening here in our chat, and I like it. Okay, and I think the sources we say will agree with what you guys are, ladies, actually think. So here are, I'm gonna drop the sources in the chat for those who like to follow along at home, and I'm also going to screen share, because that's easier also for those who will watch along later. So here we go. Here is our screen share. It's coming. Okay. So here we go. We're going to dive right in. So the first thing we're going to see is that what you're saying, right? Like this obligation factor, this righteousness, it really is coming from basically when we're being given the Torah, right? So in Parshat Kedoshim in Vayikra, Hashem says to Moshe saying, right, okay, sorry, I meant to say this at the beginning. I'm going to read sources in English for the sake of accessibility, right? I know it's very common that Orthodox rabbis like to read their sources in Hebrew. Sometimes we like to read in Hebrew and then in English for the sake of accessibility, and also so we can read the many, many sources that I really wanted us to be able to see. I'm just going to read in English. They are there in Hebrew for those who would rather read them in Hebrew, for whom that feels more accessible. For the sake of a group where I don't know everyone's comfort level with text, I'm going to stick to reading them aloud in English. So there's that. Okay, back to Parshat Kedoshim. So Hashem is speaking to Moshe, also where they're gray. I'm skipping those sections. So there's, I don't want to say the less important, but the less topical, let's say. So when you were reaping the harvest of our land, we should not reap all the way to the edges of our fields and gather the gleanings of our harvests, right? We shouldn't pick our vineyards bare or gather the fallen fruit of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and the stranger. I am the Lord your God. You shall not insult the deaf or place a stumbling block before the blind. You shall fear the Lord, fear your God. I am the Lord. Scroll. You shall not render an unfair decision. Do not favor the poor or show deference to the rich. Judge your kinsmen fairly. Skipping a couple verses. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against your countrymen. Love your fellow as yourself. I am the Lord. And then jumping a few verses ahead, you shall rise before the aged and show deference to the old. You shall fear your God. I am the Lord. When a stranger resides with you in your land, you shall not wrong him. The stranger who resides with you shall be to you as one of your citizens. You shall love him as yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Okay, before we look at Rashi here, initial thoughts. Anyone have? In the chat or out loud. You don't have to.
This just feels very familiar, is what I would say. Like,
okay,
yeah,
straightforward and direct, right? We're being given here, right? Like, these are the groundings texts, right, for social justice, as I would say, as a Jewish imperative, right? It doesn't get made up later, right? Social justice advocates didn't just decide on our own that these are things we need to do, right? It's being given to us here, right? It is in Parshat Kedoshim, right? These are texts we read every single year as we read through the Torah cycle, right? This is something we are reminded of year after year, regardless of whether or not, right, any rabbi is picking up on any of these pieces, right? As we give our drashot, right, every year, right? Some of these get picked up on more, right? Love your neighbor as yourself. People love to talk about that one, right? Right? We were strangers in a strange land. People like to talk about that one. And I think another part here that catches me as I read this each time is the reiteration of I'm Lord your God, right? Hashem is reminding us that, like, Hashem is the one telling us to do this, right? Well, Moshe may be the mouthpiece, right? Moshe is giving us God's word, right? God is the one telling us to do all of these things, right? This is God's edict to us to behave in this way, to do these things, right? These are righteous obligations to pull out. I just love those two words that came up in that initial reaction from y'all. So I'm gonna keep pulling on that, right? Okay, so moving on to source 2 here, which is one of the Rashis here. I might skip the second one. So Rashi here says, when we say to not put a stumbling block before the blind, this isn't literally, right? We're not literally talking about how we're treating a blind person, but it's more of a metaphorical, right? That we shouldn't be treating someone in a manner which is improper for them, right? To speak outside of the literal text here, right? We need to give people good advice. We need to treat people kindly and fairly and guide them in ways that will serve them well, right? So we like to think about it as more of literal stumbling blocks, but I like Rashi's interpretation here is, right, we should be guiding people in good and fair and appropriate ways. And then here I think there's an important distinction to note here, which starts to come up here, which comes up a lot in these conversations, which is, what is the meaning of tzedek, right? Is tzedek righteousness or judgment, right? And that comes up around tzedek tirdof, which we will see in a moment, but we are not going to talk about today. But so here Rashi, when he's talking about the word tzedek in this, right, which gets translated as righteousness, he even calls out here, right, that another explanation is about judging people with an inclination in their favor, right? So Rashi's even pulling out here that even when we're talking about judging with righteousness, that we should also be judging with an inclination in their favor, right? So in righteousness or in judgment, that the judgments and righteousness are sort of tied up together, according to Rashi here, which I think is an interesting thing to note and important to note as we think about what does tzedek mean, and particularly in the context of social justice work. Okay, I'm plowing ahead. We'll make sure we can have lots of conversation, but I'm going to keep moving us forward. So then we move into Devarim, and this is actually the origin source of tzedek tirdof. It is that, okay, I'm just going to read this one so we have it for the recordings particularly. So we're in Devarim 16, and says, "You shall appoint judges and officials for your tribes in all the settlements that Hashem your God is giving you, and they shall govern the people with due justice. You shall not judge unfairly. You shall show no partiality. You shall not take bribes, for bribes in the eyes of the discerning and upset the plea of the just." Bribes blind the eyes of the discerning, right? Justice shall you pursue, that you may thrive and occupy the land that Hashem your God is giving you, right? So this initial definition, right, of tzedek tirdof is about literal judgment, right? The way that our judges are behaving in a just way, right? And I think sometimes we lose that when we use it now as sort of this like social justice rallying cry, right? Which is why in the description for today I said, right, like tzedek tirdof and Tikkun Olam have become these like rallying cries, and I think that we've lost sense of some of the meaning and their origin stories here, right? So this is the origin of tzedek tirdof. Tikkun Olam actually comes out in the fourth parak of Gittin, which I did not bring here today, because these are not where I actually want us to dive in at, is not on either of these, but on some of the other social justice meatier parts that I think are great parts for us to think about. If we really want to dive into them, I don't know, let tzedek know when we can do a class on those. But Tikkun Olam comes about actually from, I believe it's from Gamliel now, I should have brought the source in front of me, but in Gittin talking about actually a new way of approaching of freeing a woman who needed a get. And he says that like, we're going to do this for the sake of Tikkun Olam, right? This is how we're going to make the world a better place, is by fixing this woman's access to getting out of her marriage, which critical, right? These are very important things to be doing in the world, but is not what we think of typically when we think about Tikkun Olam and the way most people, I would say, in the world who are engaging in rallying the cries around Tikkun Olam are typically not thinking about it. So I think that's an interesting thing to sort of just remember, like where these things are coming from. And a lot of the conversations in the Gemara and in Halakha, when they're talking about Tikkun Olam and where this comes up at, are not the way that our sources, I should say, that our sources historically talk about Tikkun Olam and tzedek tirdof are not the way that it's used now. So where does that leave us? It leaves us thinking about some of the other places that we can think about other social justice moments in the Torah, like we saw before, and like we will continue to see today. So moving on, we're still in Devarim. We also have the first moments where we start to remember that we should, right, not subvert the rights of the strangers, right? We've the strangers amongst us, the fatherless, right? We've got, right, the strangers, the orphans, and the widows, and that we have to take care of them. So there's a reminder here, again, in Devarim about taking care of these people. And then we have, this is possibly my favorite social justice statement in all of Tanakh. It is from Yeshayahu, from the prophet Isaiah, who says, we are now on source 6, if you're following along on your own source sheet, as I've just been plowing through over here. And Yeshayahu says, learn to do good, devote yourselves to justice, aid the wronged, uphold the rights of the orphan, defend the cause of the widow. And the Hebrew is also basically just that simple, right? It is so straightforward. It is so direct. Torah is often complex and is nuanced, and we rely on the commentators to tell us, like, what does it really mean? And what do we really need to do here? But in this moment, it's just so clear, right? Like, we have to learn to do good, and this is what it looks like, right? This is what we need to do. And that's just like a great moment, I think, of like how we should be, how and what we need to be doing. Also, we have from the prophet Amos, we have let justice well up like water and righteousness like an unfailing stream. This one, fun fact, is a quote, is a pasuk that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. also was known for quoting, so much so that it is actually it is like, I see Alexandra nodding because she knows this as a fellow, as someone who lives in Atlanta. I recently moved from Atlanta. It is inscripted in where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is buried. So there's like water that like rolls over his outdoor burial site with this inscripted into where the water is rushing. So I don't know if it's good enough for Dr. King. It's good enough for me. If I can be half the social justice where the Dr. King was, I will have exceeded my goals in life. So that's Amos. And then there's this half a verse from Psalms, I think, that is also just like a nice touch of you love righteousness and hate wickedness. And that is like a quick and dirty on Tanakh, right? On social justice in Tanakh, right? Then we'll move on from Tanakh. But like, this is like a quick and dirty on social justice in Tanakh. So before we move on from Tanakh, what if this resonates for you? Or maybe I'll do this. Put in the chat which of these, there's 8 sources here, which number, 1 through 8, resonates the most with you. I like to use the chat and be interactive, or you can say it out loud. But of these sources, 1 through 8, which one resonated the most? I guess I can scroll back because some of you people are looking on the screen. We've got 6 and 8, 6, 8, 2, 4, but 2 different pieces of artwork. Ecstatic tirdof on it. Okay, but you are, I know this about Michelle, but no one else knows, but Michelle is a judge. So she gets a different, we'll forgive you for it. Fun things when you know the people in the room is you can layer on parts with them. You should be judging people that way. It's okay. All right. Thank you for, thinking about this and engaging in it together. I like that people resonated, that different things resonated, and I hope that I was able to give you some new things to think about with Tanakh there. Okay. So now we're going to move into good old Pirkei Avot, because what would we do without some Pirkei Avot? There's so many good nuggets. It was very hard to narrow it down to 3. It was a task, my friends. Okay, so I think the first of these will be familiar to people, right? Shimon HaTzadik was one of the last men of the Great Assembly, and he said the world stands upon 3 things: Torah, Avodah, and Gemilut Chasadim, right? Torah, temple service, and Gemilut Chasadim, which Sefaria translates as the practice of acts of piety, which I left as that translation because translating Gemilut Chasadim can be a little bit tricky. So we'll leave it that way. And there's another thought on the three things upon which the world, there's probably many of them, but there's another one that I thought was relevant. Three things upon which the world stands, which is Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel in Pirkei Avot 118, who says the world stands on justice, which is on din, which is like more like legal justice, on emet, truth, and on shalom, peace. And he says this is based on a pasuk in Zechariah, execute the judgment of truth and peace in your gates, right? So he's pulling these three words together as his proof text, right? So Shimon HaTzadik has no proof text. Shimon ben Gamliel has a proof text. I don't know. Does anyone have thoughts on if either of these feel more resonant? Do you think they overlap? I like to force people to be interactive. As if we were actually in a room together. We're pretending we are actually in a room together, my friends. No thoughts? Okay, you don't have to. I'm not forcing you to. Rachel looks like she's thinking.
I mean, I sort of feel like they're of course related, and it almost feels like the second set is just building upon the first, like it's aspects of Torah, like it's just taking out pieces of the whole is what it feels like to me.
Okay. All right. I'll take it. All right, so it's interesting, right? Like, is it the big picture or is it right? Are we macro or micro, maybe? Right? Like, maybe we'll call that as our distinction here. And then, of course, we could not be complete in Pirkei Avot, at least on this topic, without Pirkei Avot 2:16, where we have Rabbi Tarfon used to say, "It is not your duty to finish the work, but neither are you at liberty to neglect it." Right? This is like, I know, one of those sort of ultimates, one of those catchphrase ones, but I think this one is like actually really meaningful in the work. So often, I know I get caught up in this, and I think I am not alone in this. Social justice work can feel really, really overwhelming. But yet we have a rabbi here saying, like, just do something, right? Okay, he's talking more about learning Torah, because we go on to talk about, if you've studied much Torah, you're given reward and pay people for your labor, which also is social justice, right? To make sure people are actually getting paid. And also, like, just do something, right? Just start the work, right? Engage in some part of the work. Anything we do is better than doing nothing. And I think that reminder, right, from our sages is a really important reminder to ourselves sometime, as we go out and do the work and to engage in it meaningfully. Again, even if it's not all of it, right? We don't have to do it all, right? We don't have to complete the work. But not knowing the end doesn't mean we don't have to start, right? Not knowing, we don't even have to know what the end is going to look like, right? Sometimes I think to start the work, right? Do something.
So I do have a question about this, because it's so regularly appears out of the context in which you're presenting it, surrounded by the rest of this text. And so I am scratching my head a little bit at its inclusion with these other items. So could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So, I mean, they're just, so Pirkei Avot is lots of chunks of things people say, right? So this is the whole section here of this statement from Rabbi Tarfon that they're bringing. And this was like a whole quote that Rabbi Tarfon used to say. He would say, "You're not a liberty."
What can you say something about the significance of his locating this statement with these other statements about, getting the reward for studying Torah? No? Okay.
I wish I had great insights about them being all together. We could pull the class and see if other people have great insights. I think it's just that, like, these things are all equally important, right? You have to do the work, right? You should study Torah and you'll get a reward, right? These things were all equally important, I think, to Rabbi Tarfon, such that this is what his students would remember about him, right? That he said these four things, right? This is what because this is all oral, right? These were oral things, right? That they got recorded in the Mishnah, that like these were 4 things that Rabbi Tarfon was like really remembered for saying, right? Like, what are the 4 things your students will remember you for? Like, these are the 4 things Rabbi Tarfon.
Okay.
Like, this was his legacy almost to his students, right?
But also, it feels like there's a bit of a connection between the idea of Torah being this big work, and you're never finished, but at least try, make an effort. When you're going to work, put in whatever effort you have, be fully there at that time, and then it's okay not to be the best at every single thing that you do, but at least you're making the effort and doing the best of your ability in that area. It they connect for me in that kind of way of there's a larger piece and then there's the personal piece. What I tell my children all the time about Tikkun Olam, it feels too big. It feels so big sometimes, but it's not about the big. It's about repairing your part of the world. It's repairing that small piece that you have, that you're responsible for. And if we all did that, could you imagine how much we would get done? And so for me, it does connect that it's
Okay,
about
thank
the
you.
larger and then the small piece
Yeah.
that you can take home.
Thank you.
I like it. All right. Anything else before we keep moving ahead? Other thoughts on these 3 pieces from Pirkei Avot, how they connect together? Oh, Michelle, yes. This is one of my favorite parables. Are other people familiar of the starfish on the beach story? The old man and the starfish? Jen is. Jen knows that. It's one of my favorite things. Rachel is shaking her head. Okay. I will show this very quickly. Once upon a time, I was going to get a tattoo of a starfish before I became Orthodox. This was like, I'm so into the story. Okay. So very quickly, Al Ragel Echad, the story is, there is an old man is walking along the beach, and he sees a figure off in the distance, a child, and the kid is like bending over and looks kind of like he's dancing. He can't figure out what's going on. He gets closer and he realizes that this child is bending down and picking up starfish and like flinging them into the ocean. And he's like, what the heck? So he goes up and he approaches the kid and he's like, hey kid, what are you doing? And the kid says, it's low tide. And if these starfish are left on the beach, they're all going to die. And the old man says, but you can't possibly save all of these starfish. There's like hundreds of starfish. And the kid goes, bends down, picks up another starfish, flings it back into the ocean and says, I made a difference to that one. And so like, that's like everything you can do, every bit you can do makes a difference. So make a difference to that one, right? Each one makes a difference. So that's Al Regel Echad, the starfish story. I love that connection of Rabbi Tarfon to the starfish story. Thank you for connecting those pieces, Michelle. That is amazing. And now I'm going to use that whenever I teach this Mishnah. I'm going to connect it to the starfish story because it's my favorite. Okay. And we're now at 5:30. Okay. So I brought actually 3. We're totally not going to make it through 3, but that's okay because we've had a lively discussion and that's the most important part. So I think I'm going to jump. Well, maybe we'll come back to this one, but we're going to go to the next one first because I'm the teacher and I get to do what I want. So we're going to go to, wait, where am I on pages? We're going to go to Lo Ta'amod Al Dam Re'echa, because I think that this is, to me, one of the most clear, clear and interesting paths to follow. So this is, Sarah, do you see it? Do you see where we are? Can you align? If you are looking at paper pages, we are on page 6. It has source 14 at the top, Sanhedrin 73a2. So Lo ta'amod al dam re'echa is the principle to not stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. do not stand idly by is typically how we talk about these like social justice principles. Well, that's what it is, but it's literally like to not stand by the blood of your neighbor. So we have here source 14, a Gemara from Masachet Sanhedrin. So this is just straight out of Sfaria, as I said, with Sfaria's translations before. The way that Sfaria's translations are in Gemara is that the bold writing is the actual Gemara translation, and then the not bold is where they actually use Steinsaltz's translations, and so the not bold is actually where they've already infused Rashi into it. So we're going to read it the way that they've given it to us. So we got that infusion mixed in, which gives us a nice way of gathering what's happening here together. All right. So we are on again on source 14, Sanhedrin 73. So the Gemara says, right, this is what this Tikkun Olam is off to the side here, right? The sages taught in a Braita. From where is it derived that with regard to the one who pursues another in order to kill him, right? This is the concept halachically of a rodef, which we are not talking about today, but for those who are familiar with it, that's what that is. Another in order to kill him, the pursued party may be saved at the cost of a pursuer's life. The verse states, right? So this is them bringing their proof text. You shall not stand idly by the blood of another. Rather, you must save him from death, right? So that's, right, Rashi saying that, right? And the Gemara asks, right? Wait a second here. But does this verse really come to teach us this? Gemara loves doing this for those who don't know. This verse, right, this same verse, do not stand idly by the blood of your neighbor, of another, is required for that which is taught in a Braita, right? A different teaching. From where is it derived that one who sees another drowning in a river or being dragged away by a wild animal or being attacked by bandits is obligated to save him? The Torah states, you shall not stand idly by the blood of another. The Gemara then answers, yes, it is indeed so that this verse relates to the obligation to save one whose life is in danger. So just to step out for a second here, the Gemara did something really interesting here that's like a total like amazing Gemara thing. And if this was a Gemara shiur, we would analyze what the Gemara did here, but it's not. It's a social justice shiur. So we're just going to talk about this from the social justice perspective, which is what they did here was instead go like, no, actually, we don't want to talk. We don't need this to talk about rodef, right? We don't need to talk about this like chasing after someone, killing someone else, right? Lo ta'amod al dam re'echa, right? Not standing idly by the blood of another is actually talking about our need to save someone when they're drowning in a river, being dragged away by an animal, or being attacked by bandits, and our obligation to save that person, right? Like that's actually what that really means. And the Gemara is like, oh, actually, yeah, you're right. Like we do have that obligation, and like we learned that from another teaching from our sages, right? Like our sages already did teach us that. And actually that passage that we had from the Torah, like, is actually our validation that that's actually a true thing. And that's actually something that we have to do. And so like the fact that the sages are like backing themselves up on that is something that's really important. Not being a bystander. Exactly, Ellen. Like you have to jump in, you have to do something. This is an active thing to help out, to step up, to do something. So that's like where this Gemara is. And it goes further, right? So then Rambam, Maimonides, in Mishnah Torah, which is a halachic work, then comes out and it takes this further and actually says that, I'm going to read this again. Sorry for reading at you. You can read yourselves also if you have screen in front of you, or paper, you can read in front of you. So in Cohort sorry, not nefashot, nefesh, murder and the preservation of life. Rambam says, whenever a person can save another person's life, but he fails to do so, he transgresses a negative commandment, right? That's really big, right? He's now said, this isn't just something good to do. this is actually a commandment, right? This is actually a negative commandment, right? As it says in Vayikra, do not stand idly by while your brother's blood is at stake, right? Lo ta'amod al dam re'acha is a negative commandment, as according to Rambam, right? It's now been jumped up a little, right? Like he's now codifying, right? This is a commandment. Similarly, this commandment applies when a person sees a colleague drowning at sea, being attacked by robbers or a wild animal, and he can save him himself or can hire others to save him. Okay, like we've now leveled it up again. Similarly, it applies when he hears Gentiles or Mosri, which are like a different type of people, right? Conspiring to harm a colleague or planning a snare for him when he does not inform him and notifying him of the danger. Okay, Rambam's now leveled us up again in the like level of action you have to take, right? So it's not just that, right? So first it was like active danger, and now it's like, okay, you hear someone might be plotting against them, right? And it applies when a person knows of a Gentile or a man of force who has a complaint against a colleague, and he, right, the person who hears of it, can appease the aggressor on behalf of their colleague, but fails to do so. Okay, so now we've leveled it up again, right? So now you've just heard of someone who has a complaint against them, and you can intervene, right? So like now we're really just at like bystander intervention, right? That Ali brought us up just before, okay, right? And similarly, in all analogous instances, a person who fails to act, right? So now we're like, okay, like lest you think it was only these very specific instances. No. Rambam says like all of them, all analogous instances, a person who fails to act transgresses the commandment, do not stand by your brother's blood this day, right? Lo ta'amod al dam re'acha, Rambam is telling us here like is very serious, right? Like this is a lot of words he has given, right? He's given us like a big chunk, right? Like Rambam is not always like the most wordy. And he's given like a lot of words with a lot of clarity to like taking this as a really serious case that we really need to think about and really act on positively, right? Right? We need to be very proactive so as not to transgress this negative commandment, right? So I'm going to pause and then maybe we can do one more. Thoughts or reactions to Lo ta'amod al dam re'acha before we, and then I think we can jump back into one more. We're good. I'm seeing some good head nods.
I was going to say, I'm kind of experiencing this at work now, so it's nice to hear that it's in the Torah that way. Good. I appreciate it.
All right. We're good? Should we go back? Should we do one more? Okay. I'm going to go back in time. By back in time, I really just mean we're going to scroll back in our source sheet, which is just only annoying for Sarah, who's looking at physical papers. But for the rest of us, we're just going to jump back in our source sheet. So we're going to go back to page. We're going to go back to the page before that one, to where we've got source 12 at the top, which I pulled out the phrasing of Kulchem Aravim Zebazeh. Typically, you'll hear this as Kol Yisrael Aravim Zebazeh. But in one of the texts, it says Kulchem. And I really liked Kulchem because that's right. That's like everyone is responsible for one another, as opposed to just like all of Israel is responsible for one another. Because when we say all of Israel is responsible for one another, it can make us feel as though we are only responsible for other Jews. And factually, that's not true. Like Torahly, when I say factually, I really mean like according to the Torah and what it has told us and what it is asking of us in our sources, that's actually not true. The Torah actually wants us to be responsible for everybody and not only Jews. So Kulchem Aravim Zebazeh, I think actually much better encapsulates what we're actually talking about here and what we are actually asking of, what the Torah is asking of us. Let us say it that way. So we've got this Midrash Tanchuma on Nitzavim, right? So it's on Parshat Nitzavim, this piece from Devarim. So in Devarim, it tells us about the appointing of our tribal leaders, and that's what the Midrash Tanchuma is responding to here. And you're saying, right, your tribal leaders, right, your elders and your law officers, although I have appointed for you heads, judges, elders, and law officers, and you shall all be equals before me, since it is stated, blah, 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 every person in Israel. And another interpretation they're saying of this is that all of you are responsible for one another, right? Which according to, right, so what Midrash Tanchuma here is saying is that, like, it doesn't actually matter on some level, that there are elders and heads and judges and law officers, that everyone is on equal status when it comes to taking care of one another and being responsible for the status and the future of the people of Israel and of their community and of, right, like, we all have to intervene, right? I think it's interesting to actually do this after the one we just did, right, where we just heard, right, like, we all have to intervene when someone is in danger, right? So too, we all have to take care of one another, right? We are all responsible for one another, for good and for bad, I think, right? Those things are not called out here, right? The Midrash Tanchuma was not getting into that level of depth. He's just trying to understand the words on the page. But I feel pretty confident in extrapolating that's really, right, and when we're thinking about it, particularly with a social justice lens, that's really important to think about, right? To what extent does this go? Right, and if we would say to the Rambam that we just saw, right, that extent goes pretty far, right? We are very responsible for one another. Okay, so then there's this Mishnah, not Mishnah, there's this Gemara from Masachet Shabbat, source 13, where he's saying, I'm just going to skip this first part where they're setting up who is or isn't talking, and says, in any event, they said, right, whether it's Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yonatan or Rabbi Chanina and Rabbi Yochanan, whatever, in any event, they said, anyone who had the capability to effectively protest the sinful conduct of the members of his household and did not protest, he himself is apprehended for the sins of the members of his household and punished. If he is in a position to protest the sinful conduct of the people of his town and he fails to do so, he's apprehended for the sins of the people of his town. And if he's in a position to protest the sinful conduct of the whole world and he fails to do so, he's apprehended for the sins of the whole world. Now that's pretty big. We thought Rambam was going big, right? Like, this Gemara is like, go out and protest and do it big, right? Are you still here? You appreciate this, right? Like, this is you in action, right? Like, go protest all of it, go big, right? So, how does this land for people to feel like this level of responsibility on being responsible for one another?
I mean, I feel like it's like purposefully, like, if you're not understanding that this is a huge responsibility, we are making sure that you feel the weight of this, and it's on purpose. Like, you should feel the weight of it. And I do.
I'm glad I've taught you to feel the weightiness of this.
I mean, it's a lot.
My work here is done. Feels almost contradictory to doing as much as you can. Can you say more, Michelle? Or type more?
I can say more. It's saying go big, do bigger, do more. But before we were saying do what you can, do whatever you're able. And it can almost, to me, it's almost feeling like that could be contradictory, because go big or go, like, right? Because it's like the go big, go home kind of mantra. And I know that's not what this is saying, but it almost feels like it's going there.
You're saying, as opposed to the Pirkei Avot about you don't have to complete the work, you just have to start it. Right. And Ali's interpretation of, like, just start small, just do one thing, right? And how we were talking about, right? You just have to do a thing. Right.
Yes.
I can hear that, right? How, right? And
but also,
ahead,
go big in the same way that we say, like, it isn't contradictory at the same time, because what's big for you and what's big for me are not necessarily the same things. And we have to take into account what each individual has the ability to do at any given time. Like 15, 20 years ago, going to a protest and spending all day doing that is something that I could have totally done. Now, as a parent of young children, it's not. And I don't have that, but I can do X, Y, or Z. Like, I don't think that they're contradictory. I think they're two sides of the same coin of, you have to do as much as you can for as long as you can, versus you have to take on the whole world.
Look, and I think you're both right. And I think it's a hard balance to find that middle ground, I think, for people. And I think there's what to say and what to acknowledge in, like, even when we can't do it sometimes, it's one thing for the Torah to still tell us that, like, that's the expectation, right? That, like, or the Gemara's expectation and Rambam's expectation, which, you know, we can call it out when we see it, right? Like, these are men in a very different era that are also having these conversations and thinking about it, right? Like, I'm not afraid to say it. I'm not afraid to say it on a recording. Right? Like, it was a very different time, right? And it's a different thing to say we're going to protest the simple conduct of the whole world when we aren't the right. And by we, I mean, like, right? I mean, like, the Jewish world, to say, right, that this is the expectation, right, to the people and by the people who are not the people that are raising the children, right? And so what does that mean? And what does that look like? And how do we think about that now and in our modern era is a conversation that we can have, right? And that I think we are starting to have. And I think that that's great to think about and to engage with. So I think that there's probably a yes and a middle ground to try to find between what does it mean to do the most we can, and what does it mean to protest in a way that, Sarah, I see you 1 second, to say, this is how much I can protest. This is what it means for me to do it. This is what it means for me to engage in the work in a meaningful way that is, right, I don't have to know the end result, right? I'm still going to start. I'm going to take my steps, and I'm going to be actively engaged in protest, in social justice work, in stepping out and doing something. But it might not be all of it, right? And I'm not going to finish the work, and I'm not going to know what the end is, but I'm still going to do something, and I'm going to be engaging in it. I'm going to be doing something because I know that it is still part of my responsibility to protect the world, right? It is my responsibility to stand up for the rights of others, right? It's my responsibility to not stand idly by the blood of my neighbor, right? Okay, Sarah.
Thanks. So my thought went in a different direction, which is
I want to hear
that in recent, I think in the last couple of years in American case law, this has actually come to court, where parents went to jail for acts that their young children committed by getting their hands on guns that were properly, whatever, secured, or, you know, that resulted in harm and even in one case death.
Wow.
And so I was just really struck by how that has shown up recently. And I think probably there isn't a particular case that comes to mind, but the sinful conduct of the people of the town. I mean, there are public officials who have found that, and perhaps business people who have found themselves in this kind of position in American case law. Well, I just find that really just an interesting reflection.
Yeah, the overlaps and sometimes the interplays between, like, Jewish law and American law, and where they align and they don't align, is fascinating to me. And those are always, like, really, really lively, can be really interesting and lively conversations, especially with, like, people who know both types of law. I love talking to. So, because there are places where they do and don't, right, where they do and don't overlap, and where, right, our ethics and morals, and it also happens in, like, medical ethics also, and where, like, Jewish medical ethics and American, right, biomedical ethics and
Yeah.
So there's some interesting overlap there also. Okay, I'm going to stop there with sources, as you can tell, because I turned off the screen share. And would just love to hear, I feel like that was like a good sort of moment we got to in discussion. We got to like a really good spot. Other thoughts people have, like, what did this bring up for you in this moment? Where are you sitting with these sources, with the start of our conversation? Where are you at?
I'm just thinking about, I mean, I'm still stuck on the weight and the large, I think the thing that I keep flipping around in my head is the weight of, okay, you're supposed to do everything. It feels like the point that it's everything. And it's okay if you can't, but it's also not okay that you can't if you can't, is what it feels like. And I don't really know what to do with that, with my, like, I don't know, internal fairness. I guess there's something about that for me that I just find I'm a little stuck on, and I understand, and I'm like, oh, that's probably the point, that you will never be able to do enough, and therefore you should always be trying. But it's uncomfortable. That's uncomfortable because I think we all want to feel like we can succeed, and I don't. It feels like I'm not set up to succeed, and I don't like. I want to be good. I want to do good, and I want the gold star, and it feels like there will always be the gold star that's unattainable. And that's the point. Yeah.
But I think engaging in the work is maybe
Yeah.
how you get that,
Yeah.
right? But like doing it, right? Showing up and doing it and putting in the effort, maybe.
Yeah. And that is the point, is the process, which I guess is many things, is our process.
Right. Anyone else have thoughts or reflections where you're feeling and sitting with in the moment?
I was recently asked by somebody why I feel like everything needs to be just and fair. And I think this is my answer here, because I was raised Jewish. Just funny timing.
I love it. It's part of you. It's part of your DNA. Any other thoughts or reflections?
So it's sort of, I put it in the chat, but it reminds me of, like, we're obligated to plant fruit trees, but it's not that we're going to get to experience the fruit tree, but it's the further generations that get it. And that's sort of how I'm sort of rethinking Tikkun Olam and, like, social justice, that it's not that I'm necessarily going to see all the benefits or be able to complete the work, but if I don't start and I don't make an effort, then what are we leaving for everyone else? And it's one of those where, like, I feel like Judaism kind of layers it on and teaches us the same lesson in so many different ways so we don't forget it.
Yes, very much yes. We really like to overlap and layer, and right. So it's in all the ways, and it's embedded, and it's right. There are so many ways in which we do things for the next generation, right? And that this is all right. There's a reason where the retelling of the same story every year at Haggadah, right? Of the Haggadah, right? At Pesach, we retell the exact same story every year, right? Year after year. And we say this, right? The whole repertoire, right? Like in every generation, we should think as if it's us coming out of Egypt, right? Literally, so that we don't forget what happened there, right? And if we're still retelling the same story as if we came out of Egypt, so that we still experience that, like how much more so, maybe not how much more so, right? Like, and also so too should we be doing this, right? Should we continue to maybe build a better world so that we don't have to retell the stories of now in the same way, right? So that our, 5 generations from now, our children are not retelling the stories of, the way that the world was falling apart in this moment and we couldn't save it, right? Maybe we can, instead of them, I'm going to rephrase this. Actually, I don't like the way I phrase that. So like, strike that. You can't actually do that. That was my rewinding and fast forwarding motion. So that in 5 generations, instead of our great whatever children retelling a story of their parents and great whatevers, not trying to save the world. They get to say, and you know what my great whatevers did to make the world better for me, right? Like they planted fruit trees, right? Like they showed up at protests, right? They wrote to their senators, right? They engaged in the work in whatever way worked for them, at whatever the capacity was that they had, and whatever the issues were that were important to them, right? Obviously, this is not what they're going to say about us, but right, like they did the work, they showed up, and they did it to make sure that the world was better for me, right? They created a better world. And maybe that's the point, right? The point is not even necessarily what we're going to see in our own lifetimes, but it's, right, it's that 5 generations from now, right? Instead of retelling a yucky story, they get to say something better about us. And maybe that's the next place to end. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Thank you again to Uri Tzedek for having me here to share some Torah with you all and for gathering this lovely group of humans together. And thank you to those of you who are watching afterwards for spending some of your time gathering some belated Torah from us as well. Have a lovely, lovely evening.
Thanks.
Thank you again, everyone. I just wanted to, before everyone exits out, I mean, it's okay if you have to go, but I just want to thank Rabba Melissa so much for that great class, and thank you all for your time and for being here. We have a couple more programs coming up that I just wanted to note, and the links will be wherever this video is posted. Next week on Wednesday, we have our AI's Existential Risks Reel. August 13th, we have Torah Ethics of Warfare, Must We Leave a Path for Escape? And September 30th, Going Out with Knots, My 2 Kaddish Years with Hebrew Poetry. So lots of variety of topics there, but we hope you'll join us. And thank you again to everyone and have a great day.